Good morning, everybody. My name is Juliana. I'm the creator of the website that you see behind me, the Raising Esperanza project at raisingesperanza.com, which showcases the stories and portraits of several teen mothers in the Boston area. Now, my aspiration with this project is to create a different dialogue around disadvantaged communities. I'm sure all of you could think back to other photo series or maybe newspaper articles that you've seen that depicted people as singular, monolithic images of abject poverty. With this project, I wanted to do something really different. I wanted to do something almost unheard of. I wanted to celebrate these women. I wanted to create beautiful images that ring true to the actual women depicted in them. I wanted to provide a meaningful and empowering service by creating images that these young women would treasure for a lifetime. Now I'll confess to you all, I'm actually not a journalist, and I'm also not a photographer. So how I wound up creating a photojournalism project for my senior capstone was a complete and utter accident. About a year ago, I joined this extraordinary local not-for-profit called ROCA. When I started at ROCA, my mission was just simply to volunteer for a great organization, but what I didn't expect is that I would meet some of the most extraordinary people that I've ever had the honor to encounter. So ROCA's mission is to disrupt the cycle of incarceration and poverty by helping young people transform their lives. So all of the women that you see here on my website are in ROCA's 4-year Young Mothers program. We help teen moms aged 16 to 24 who have dropped out of high school to get their GED, find stable housing and work. We'll do cooking classes, we'll do parenting classes, we'll teach them how to drive a forklift, anything you can imagine. My job was to teach GED math classes, and one day after class, one of my favorite students, her name's Lillian, you can see her here, she came up to me and she asked me if I would do her maternity photo shoot. And as you can see from the photographs, I did wind up doing that photo shoot. At the time, I remember feeling hugely honored and excited to be let in on such an important moment of this young woman's life. And that's honestly how this project got started. The first photo shoot I did was such a cool experience that I wanted to scale it up and I wanted to offer more free photography services to more women. But I also wanted this to go beyond just photos. I wanted to elevate these women's life stories. These are 8 of some of the most extraordinary people that I've ever had the honor to encounter, and I think it's such a terrible loss for us all as a group, as society in general, that we don't hear more from the media about them and their stories. So there were 3 key elements to my project. The first was, as I discussed with you, the free photography services that I provided. I did family portraits, I did maternity photo shoots, I did professional headshots, and this was by far and away my favorite aspect of this project because, the women would be so excited to have their pictures taken. As you can imagine, it's much easier to get them into my photo shoots than it was into my math classes. What are you gonna do? But it was just an exciting time. They would get dressed up, they would meet each other beforehand and do each other's hair, they would do each other's makeup, and it was just a really, really cool experience. And then the second aspect of my project is the interviews I conducted. They lasted between 15 minutes to an hour. You can see a quote from one of them here, right here. They would last between 15 minutes to an hour. I would ask primarily strengths and assets-based questions. So I would say, what's your favorite part about being a mom? What was your experience in high school like? What's something you wish more people understood about you? So all the quotes that you're going to see on my website are as unedited as possible. I've only made really small changes like for brevity or perhaps to remove a name for privacy, but I've done my utmost to preserve their original language and intent. You'll see that the stories on my website are incredibly genuine, honest, and intimate. And I think a large part of the reason for that is the relationships that I've been able to develop with my participants. You'll note that most photographers and journalists prefer to maintain objective distance from their subjects. For this project, I've taken an extremely contrary stance. All of my participants have my phone number, we'll text back and forth, we'll send each other memes, we'll go out to lunch frequently. I think it's the fact that I've spent a year getting to know these women, aside from being a really cool experience for me, has yielded a much better project. And then finally, the third aspect of my project is I built this website so that I could showcase it to all of you lovely people. So without further ado, I want to show you one of the stories on my website. I picked this one in particular because I think it challenges a lot of the assumptions people make about teen mothers. And I also think it does an excellent job illustrating how our education system can fail its young people. So this is Lynette. These are her handsome, handsome boys. These are the portraits I took of her. And I will now read on behalf of Lynette. She says, I got pregnant when I was 18 and had the boys when I was 19. I was in school until they put me on bed rest. After I went back, I was supposed to graduate with my class, but that didn't happen because I aged out. I was supposed to graduate even if I aged out. They told me that before. I was doing my classes in everything, straight A's, president of my class, doing everything I had to do. I was going to do this whole speech and everything at graduation. They took that. I was almost done, literally. It felt horrible. I love school. I was supposed to walk on my stage and give a speech. I was supposed to walk on my stage and give a speech in front of the whole class. I was supposed to graduate with my friends and hear my name. That's what I was excited for. I was like, yes, I'm going to walk the stage. I'm going to throw my cap up in the air. Right there, I shut down. School was a getaway for me. After they told me I couldn't finish, I just shut down. That was my big downfall right there. I was like, wait, I'm not going to be able to go back to school? Now what am I going to do? I didn't even try to look for any options. They said I could take GED classes, but I'm like, I don't want to take GED classes. You told me I could graduate. Why would I want to take my GED? I want to walk with my class. I want to give my speech. I want to show people I did it. After that, I was just taking care of the boys. I was staying at home and trying to avoid my home at the same time. When it was cold, I would try and stay over at a friend's house. My mom wouldn't even let me stay at the house sometimes. That's how bad our arguments got. I was technically homeless. Then, on the weekends, I'd be out on the street because the boys would be with their father and my mom wouldn't know about it. If I didn't have the boys on me, there was no way I was entering that house. It would be a fight or an argument, so I'd be out on the street. So I recognize that this story is a somber and unsettling one. And I know that because it's exactly how I felt the first time I heard it as well. However, I want to encourage each of you to feel more than simply unsettled. Instead, I want each of you to feel motivated to manifest change. Lynette has shown enormous tenacity and resiliency. She did get her GED, and now she works extremely hard to provide a good education for her sons. On our end, I think the least that we can do as a privileged community is to work towards addressing the systemic inequalities in our education system. Personally, I plan on devoting my life to finding governmental solutions to inequality, and I'd encourage each of you to be thinking about how you could do the same in your own respective fields. In the meantime, I want to ask each of you in the room today to take two much smaller steps. The first is that you visit raisingesperanza.com. Again, this is my website, the Raising Esperanza Project at raisingesperanza.com. And take a chance to read through the other 7 stories we didn't have a chance to get to today. They're all equally as inspiring and beautiful and wonderful, and I'm just so proud of the women and how their stories came out. And the second is that you take the time to visit Roca's website. There's a link right here, so it's nice and convenient. It's not hard to find. And I'd encourage you to find out more about what an incredible organization they are and what important work they do in the Boston area. So without further ado, I want to thank you all for being such a wonderful audience, and I'd love to take any questions at this time. It's quiet. Yeah, Gabby?
Did you find that any of this was like almost too much to kind of hear from them, or did you really want to get as much as possible?
In short, yes. So the question was any of this too much to hear? Was there a line that I wanted to draw where I didn't want to hear things anymore? And that's a tough question. So my goal with this project is I only wanted to ask strengths and assets-based questions, which means I only wanted to ask about, material that the participants would feel comfortable and interested in talking about. What I didn't want anyone to do is to feel like they had to go back in time and delve through some of their life's greatest hardships. That's the opposite of what my intention was. But I will also say that all of the women in Roca are very strong-minded people, and they have a narrative that they want to tell. And so I did find that I heard things that were very difficult. I did hear stories of substance abuse. I did hear stories of sexual assault. And that was very difficult. I would ask a question like, what's your favorite movie? And for all of us, we'd be like, oh, I don't know. Shreya would say The Greatest Showman. That's her favorite movie. But but she would tell me this long story. She'd pick a movie, she'd tell me this long, long story about why it was her favorite. And it would actually go back to one of the greatest hardships of her life. And it actually wound up being an exceedingly difficult question. So what was really difficult about this project was trying to walk the right balance, because I never wanted anyone to feel like they had to bring up these really difficult stories. But they naturally came up anyways. And yes, it was difficult to hear them, but I also think it was meaningful because I provided a platform for people to share something that they've, I guess, wanted to share for a long time. Any other questions that I can answer today? Yeah, Paige.
So what was the purpose of your math class? Like, what type of math did you teach? And like,
That's such a Paige question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's GED math classes. So what I did was simply material that's covered on the GED. To you and me, it might be basic math, but to them, it was difficult. You know, they'd missed several years of high school. So we would talk about fractions and how to simplify them. We would talk about multiplication. It really wasn't like calculus or derivatives or anything like that. Yeah, I hope that answered it. Any other questions today? Oh, Maria.
Are there other interviews and photos that you did that aren't on your website?
Oh, that's such a good question. So every interview I did is on the website. That being said, I've actually taken over 3,000 photographs at Roca, and there's only like 20 on the website. So there's a ton of photographs I took that weren't on here. What I did was I offered a photo shoot to every woman at Roca, including the women who didn't want to be portrayed on my website, because I didn't want anyone to feel coerced by the incentive of a photo shoot and feel like they had to get on my website in order to do that, because I only wanted people on this website who really, really wanted to tell their stories. The last thing I wanted to do is coerce anyone. So I actually did maybe double or triple the photo shoots that you can see here. Yeah. Was there a question in the front?
I was just going to ask if, with the education system failing, did you find that most of the time it was because they became pregnant? And what, they just lacked the resources to support them? Was that,
Well, think about it this way. You know, we could say someone got pregnant and therefore they had to drop out of high school. But what if someone already knew that high school wasn't going to yield anything for them? That they never had the opportunity to go to college, that they never had the opportunity that every single, one of us sitting in the room here today had, which was that we knew we had a future, we knew we were going to do important things, we knew we were going to do inspiring things. But if you grew up in a community that was a very low resource setting, you might not have ever thought or felt or had the role models to show you that you could accomplish whatever. You might not have even had the resources to believe that. You might have had a very difficult childhood, which is the case with many of my participants. And so we could say, yes, the reason they dropped out of high school is that because they got pregnant. That is true. But I would also say the reason that they dropped out of high school goes so far beyond that. I think the reason they dropped out of high school is because they knew it wasn't going anywhere for them. It wasn't yielding anything. The women, if you'll read the other stories on my website, they'll talk about, one of the moms talks about how she felt like she was keeping a chair warm, that the teachers didn't care at all. This was well before she got pregnant. That the teachers didn't care at all whether she did her work or not. No one checked. It was a pass-fail situation, and she just wasn't even checking to see, do they pass, do they fail? And she said, what's the point? What's the point of going in just to keep a chair warm? And so, yeah, when I think about the fact why they dropped out, I think of it as a much greater reason than simply they got pregnant, so they dropped out. Can I answer any further questions today? Yeah, Shreya.
What kind of policy change do you actually envision in order to, counter this kind of a problem?
Oh God, I think you just asked me the most difficult question anyone could. But, so like I just mentioned, all of these women grew up in low resource settings. And many of them immigrated to this country and consequently lacked resources that other students in this country might have access to. And so what I would tell you is that there's simply a dearth of educational resources for people. I want to phrase this the right way. There's simply a lack of educational resources for people who look like these women and sound like these women. It's basic discriminatory education policy that we don't fund schools equally, that we fund schools based on where taxpayer dollars are. So if you grow up in a low resource setting and your school is funded simply by your tax dollars, then how could that school ever improve? How could the people in that school ever get to a point where they could send their kids to school in a different tax zone? I think there's just this wide-ranging net of issues that need to be solved. But I would say the first thing that needs to really be examined is the education system, because I heard these stories and they were stomach-dropping to hear the way these students are treated and how little resources they're given to succeed. And what's worst of all is I think society at wide likes to blame women like these for getting pregnant as teenagers, likes to think that they're not trying as hard as everybody else, they're not working as hard, they're not pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. But one of my favorite quotes is by a man who said, well, what if they didn't have boots in the first place?